Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. As mentioned, I'm a assistant professor of urology, and I do primarily male infertility for a living, which may make you wonder why I'm here talking about a device that's primarily for lower urinary tract symptoms. I'm going to try to share sort of my journey from the time I came here, which was the fall of 2013, to now, which has really been remarkable and wouldn't have been possible without sort of a lot of the resources of the university. And I will say, as sort of a prelude, that I've been at University of Washington and University of Illinois Chicago and at Duke before that, and this place is far and away the easiest place to do this kind of stuff that I've seen. So what are lower urinary tract symptom, or LUTS? It's essentially BPH. There's 16.5 million men over the age of 50 who have urinary symptoms where they either go to the bathroom too frequently or have severe urgency, get up at night, or sometimes in its most severe case, urinary retention, where they're not actually able to urinate at all. As our population gets older, the number of men with this will increase. So what is really the problem that we're trying to solve? Essentially, there's something called a urine flowmeter, which in our urology guidelines is one of the critical tools in assessing these men and figuring out how bad their symptoms are in order to dictate therapy. This technology was developed in the early 80s and honestly hasn't changed much since. It's essentially a scale that sits on the bottom of a funnel attached to a commode, and it prints out on a piece of receipt paper the tracing of how they void, both the volume that's voided and sort of how rapidly the urine's coming out. One of the problems that we have is PCPs don't have these expensive urine flow meters. They're anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 to buy. Yeah, it's good to be in medical devices, I guess. But a lot of the time, the treatment's based on subjective patient input. And with the volume of these patients, this is such a common condition that there's huge swaths of the United States now that don't have a urologist, and primary care providers are managing a lot of this. And often they can only treat the symptoms and not the cause because they can't really diagnose it. The other problem we have in the urology clinic is that this is done in a very artificial setting. The best sign of this might be if you go to any urology clinic in the United States, every bathroom within a 200-foot radius will have signs that say, do not go to the bathroom, come to the urology center, before you go, because we need to get a urine sample. The problem that we have is 50% of these clinic tests are uninterpretable, meaning the patient has to void a minimum of 150 milliliters to actually generate any actionable data or for it to be a valid test. And because of this, we waste, and we have a paper on this, about 2 weeks of clinic time per year. And the typical throughput is, the patient comes in, you see the patient, you say, oh, you need this test. They wait around to drink some fluid, they void. If it's not enough, they literally have to make a separate clinic visit back, which especially in our area where our patients are geographically dispersed is a significant issue. So when I got here, I approached my chairman and said, oh, I've got this idea. What do you think? Figuring he would say, this is ridiculous. You do male infertility for a living. Why are you messing around with this stuff? It was Pat Cartwright, who was our division chief, and he was very, very supportive. And the department put up some money to work with a BioInnovate team that ultimately ended up coming up with this company, StreamDX. And initially, we went through a number of different sort of prototypes in terms of how to measure this, and almost every other competitor was measuring urine flow by weight. And it's, for a number of reasons, not very practical to do that. So we actually landed on capacitance, and there was IP available in the area, and filed a provisional patent, and essentially had a team of 4 students working on this for about a year. And when we began this, it was Andy Southwick, who was the head of urology at the VA, has since moved to New Zealand, and myself. And then 4 members of our team were Chris, who's now an ophthalmology resident in Wisconsin, Alvin, who's employed full-time by the company, Tab, who went on to get an MBA and now works for another company in town and is hoping to come back once we get to the point where we actually are doing marketing and stuff. And then Matt, who's a PhD mechanical engineer here, who's still involved with the company and does a lot of contract work for us. So Our story, that's a little bit on the background of what the clinical need was that we were trying to address. But our story is essentially, this was an idea born out of clinical frustration on my part, and BioInnovate was seeded with about $10,000 in September of 2013. The company was incorporated in 2014. TVC was great and found us a number of different business people to partner with. Lena Boyd was excellent. Ultimately, we found a CEO who used to be the chief operations officer for Thermo Fisher and had sort of retired out here and wasn't dealing well with retirement. And he now does this full time. And then a chief technology officer, a guy, Scott McClellan, who had a bunch of startup companies here and was sort of in between. And then we have two full-time engineers. One is Alvin, and another is Kent, who was an undergrad here in engineering and then came on with us. So in February of 2015, we licensed the technology. We've managed to raise some money. The university has a lot of different options. From TCIP and the engine funding, we've raised about $65,000. We've had two seed series, which have raised about $500,000. We got a TAP grant, and then we have another seed series ongoing, which is in talks with a bunch of different local investment groups. And then we just got a phase 2 SBIR for $1.5 million after 4 phase 1s that, let's just say, the NIH was less than enthused with. My story is I did fellowship at the University of Illinois, Chicago. My fellowship mentor, who's the chairman of urology there, has a dual appointment in bioengineering. And that's kind of where I got interested in this. I've had one failed startup. 3 total have been founded. StreamDX has probably been the most successful, and a lot of that is to the credit at the university. I, again, do mail-in fertility for a living, have some grant, all of my grant funding up until this other grant is to do that. And then my research interests are the genetic of erectile dysfunction, sperm genetics, epigenetics, microfluidic sperm sorting, male infertility, and population health. And I put this up there only to remind people that it just has to be, you have to have some expertise in the area. And there's a huge number of engineers here looking for problems to solve. And believe me, if I've been able to do this, anybody can do this. So basically we have this point of care urine flow device, and patients urinate into this little cup. It goes to the cloud, and then physicians can look at the data, and it works as kind of a software as a service application. Our team here is Scott McClellan, who's the chief technology officer, Brian Holt, who's the CEO, and then 2 engineers. And then we have 5 people on the board of directors. Pat Cartwright, whose idea this was one of them. I will say that a lot of the seed round was funded by urologists, some of them who are my partners at our institution, so hopefully the company is successful because they know where to find me if it's not. But we've had a great group of people, and one of the wonderful things for us was that I never had to figure out any of the business side of it because I was very upfront about saying, I don't understand that. That's not my area of expertise, and TVC helped us find those people. At this point, the company has 1 issued patent and 3 provisional patents, as well as an exclusive license from the university. The licensing team here is great to deal with, far and away probably the easiest I've dealt with of any university. Our target audience is about 19,000 urologists and geriatric physicians, and then the secondary target customers are 160,000 primary care physicians. When you look at our device, the current in-office devices cost $4,000 to $10,000. There's an existing CPT code. And there's a lot of wasted clinical time. And as a surgeon, we talk a lot about working at the top of your license. And the patients you really want to see are the ones who need a surgical intervention. And this really allows you to do that. The cost of this device as a subscription is $129 a month. The device costs about $37 to make, probably less at scale. And the goal is to really improve patient outcomes. So when wrapping things up here, when we look, this is kind of the revenue and the funds that we need to do this. It will take us probably another $800,000 to $1 million to actually bring this to market. But to put it in comparison, a lot of companies who've gotten where we've gotten have spent about, millions of dollars. So in conclusion, the first thing I would say is this is hard. It's probably been harder for me than getting an NIH grant. It's also been a lot more rewarding in a lot of ways. Historically, this type of work hasn't really been rewarded in academic medicine. I think that's changing. I don't know that we're totally there yet, but this is something that's increasingly valued and usable for promotion. And then finally, fundraising is the engine that drives startups. And we're really fortunate here to have a good infrastructure with the university and I think an evolving local infrastructure to fund things. And then finally, I would say the other thing I've learned is the idea is sort of far less crucial than the market and the team and the support you have to do that. So thank you very much and appreciate it.